And welcome back to the Hot Lap, where we are looking at the race fallout from the Dutch Grand Prix. Planet F1 have got an interesting thing on Red Bull's split on Sergio Perez's future amid concerning Ricciardo update. As part of their news roundup, this has been making the rounds because Helmut Marko has intimated, yes, Helmut, another classic quote from him, but he's intimated that despite what Christian Horner says, that yes, he does have a contract for 2024, Perez that is, intimating that Sergio Perez will remain at Red Bull. But then Helmut Marko has intimated, suggested that that's not necessarily the case. But then this is coming from Helmut. But the article says, as the dust, or should we say rain, settled at the Dutch Grand Prix, there were plenty of headlines to come out of this weekend's action. And Red Bull bosses at odds over Perez. It says, from the moment Daniel Ricciardo joined the team, Sergio Perez's future at Red Bull has been put under the spotlight. But while Helmut Marko may pour petrol on the flames, Christian Horner has sought to end any speculation. Speaking after Perez's P4 in Zandvoort, Horner said the Mexican will be at the team next year. He says Checo's situation for next year is clear, the team boss said. He's a Red Bull racing driver. We have an agreement with him. Irrelevant of agreements, we're pleased with the job he's doing. You saw his drive today. He was unlucky with the pit lane speed limiter. That is the one that cost Perez his 5-second penalty, ultimately his podium. He said he's second in the World Championship. He's the only driver rather than Max to have won Grand Prix this year. It's easy to beat up on him when the barometer is so high on the other side, but he will be our driver in 2024. But there we go. I mean, what's interesting is Bottas was beaten up, I think, by the press and everything as well. Having said that, I think in qualifying and sometimes and the race, I do feel he, without looking at the stats, but I do feel he fared better than Perez is doing. But I do feel sometimes in the media he kind of got, and in the comment section, absolutely, that comment section, but he got, just as much stick, I think, as Perez is doing. But then is Perez doing a worse job? But it's going to be really interesting. I think Perez must have breathed a sigh of relief in a almost sick and twisted way when Ricciardo hurt his hand, because I think the whole world seems to be convinced that if Ricciardo completely destroyed, and he hasn't done so yet, and didn't look like he's going to, but if he completely destroyed Tsunoda, then that almost and Perez continued his averageness, let's say, against Verstappen, that's going to almost guarantee a seat at Red Bull. And I kind of really, really agree. It puts Red Bull in a difficult position. But alas, we're talking ifs, and that hasn't really happened, has it? So, and more for that, as we said, our rejects of the race were definitely the Mercedes Grand Prix team, not the drivers though. It will be their strategist, their strategy department. Dutch Grand Prix, Mercedes to review decision. This is on Sky Sports F1, Sky F1. Mercedes to review decision making after late Lewis Hamilton and George Russell pit stops. It says, it's good when it hurts, when it stings, it sticks, says Toto Wolff, after Mercedes' strategy miscue in Zandvoort's difficult wet opening laps. McLaren also left with regrets about not pitting sooner. And so Wolff says Mercedes will review their catastrophic decisions in the wet and wild opening laps of Sunday's Dutch Grand Prix. And as we know, Hamilton and Russell were among a handful of drivers not to have pitted in the very obvious let's really pit on the opening lap. But on the opening 2 laps, as rain started to fall down Zandvoort with increasing but unexpected ferocity. Pitting on laps 3 and 4 respectively, Hamilton and Russell, who had started the race from third, Russell did, re-emerge on track towards the back of the field, and with massive, I think, at the point gaps. I mean, I remember, if you remember Russell, his somewhat interesting, let's say, radio call. I was forecast for a podium. How did we mess this up? The little swear word in between. And I guess he's right. I think a lot of people predicted George Russell to get a podium. That Mercedes, I still feel it was the second fastest car. Yes, it's hard to pass it. I mean, you look at Hamilton, he was all over Sainz. Couldn't pass him, but I can't, with the DRS he would have got past, wouldn't he? But he was all over him. He was all over Carlos Sainz in the in the Ferrari. And Wolf admitted the cars stayed out catastrophically too long and said the Brackley outfit will now collectively assess what went wrong and how to avoid similar mistakes in the future. He says, "We will review thoroughly," the Mercedes team principal told Sky Sports F1. He said the situation is never one person or one department. It is the communications between driver, pit wall, strategy, the weather frog, and then all of us taking decisions. That was absolutely subpar from all of us, and that includes me, he goes on to say. Wolf, who often says Mercedes emerged stronger from difficult experiences, added, "It's good when it hurts, when it stings, it sticks." And our frustrated Mercedes were left to wonder what might have been with both cars. I reckon they could have easily got on the podium. I think even Hamilton from 13th. You have to wonder, had he pitted on that opening lap, I think he would have got a podium. We could have had two Mercedes on the podium once we found out what happened to Perez. I mean, look how much ground Perez gained on Max Verstappen by pitting. Horner urged, this is an interesting one from motorsport.com. Horner urged Red Bull to pit Verstappen before F1 Dutch Grand Prix red flag. Christian Horner says he shouted, "Get him in," at Max Verstappen's race engineer to make sure Red Bull would not risk the Dutchman's Formula One home win at Zandvoort. The Dutch Grand Prix was derailed by two rain showers. The latter, as we know, prompted a red flag when Alfa Romeo Zhou forgot to brake, it seemed, but I know he did. But it looked like he was playing a PlayStation game for the first time. And where's the braking marker? But at the start of lap 62, the downpour, Verstappen wasn't entirely convinced about coming in for intermediates yet, with his race engineer, Jampiro, or JP, as they say, GP, urging him that it would be a good time to pit as the track conditions worsened rapidly. Now, afterwards, Horner says the call to err on the safe side and bring in his driver came from him. He says, "We were a bit unsure of what was going to happen with the weather. Was it a few spots or was it going to blow through?" Horner said, and in the end, I was shouting at GP, "Get him in." And Horner says his team nailing the strategy, and that they did on a day when the likes of McLaren, Mercedes and Williams didn't, was part of luck and part of risk management. I think it's a combination of the two, he added. There were so many things that could go wrong. He goes on to say, "We saw calls being made early on where the cars dropped out of contention into contention, but we've done 8 pit stops. We've done 8 pit stops today, and the team has nailed every one of them, other than the one that Checo gave us about 5 seconds notice for." So it's been an incredible team performance. And talking about those wet weathers, I mean, George Russell came out before, and other drivers, I think Ocon as well, indicating how useless, given the current state of Formula One, the wet weather tyres are. And this is on WTF1.com. Every single race weekend, since the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, has been plagued by rain. Not necessarily in the race itself, but there's been at least, it goes on to say, one rainy session over the last 9 weekends. He says, "We all joke about the full wet tyre, how useless it is, and I think it is, I completely agree, how we never see it, or it's a waste of rubber, but the thing is, it's not a joke anymore. No, I don't think it is. The Dutch Grand Prix was the latest race to fall victim to the rainy conditions, with Sunday's race being red flagged after heavy rain sent Zhou aquaplaning into turn 1. Now, after soaking everyone in the grandstand, the rain stopped. We waited until it was safe to go back out. This had many F1 fans questioning, why don't we use the extreme wet tyre? Recently, race control has been much more hesitant about letting drivers race in completely wet conditions and or various occasions. We find ourselves waiting for the track to dry before drivers head out on inters, or, like Spa, send the drivers out on the blue wall wet tyres to try and clear the standing water on track before everyone dives into the pits for the much faster intermediate tyre. Now, back in Belgium, as we've been talking, Russell called the wets extremely pointless. And after the Dutch Grand Prix, he doubled down. He told the media, including the race, that extreme tyre is a complete waste of time at the moment, and I think it should just be parked. And if the conditions are too wet for intermediates, I think, unfortunately, we're just going to have to wait until conditions get better. Many would agree, and Pirelli themselves know the product is flawed, and they're currently working on 2 major issues. One being the tyre's performance, but I think this is the main one, though, I think, is the visibility. The FIA tested the first bolt-on prototype of spray tyres, but the results didn't achieve the desired outcome. So we may have to wait a little longer until we can race in actual wet conditions again. I mean, this is like a multi-billion pound, not Pirelli company, but when you look at Formula One itself, and the fact that they cannot get it right. Yes, I appreciate it's different. I mean, we all drive in ridiculously wet conditions, but our cars are a lot heavier. Our tyres are such as well, and we're not going at the speeds of Formula One, albeit the throttle works both ways. But in the interest of safety, I completely understand. Having said that, when it is raining, yes, when it is a massive deluge, I get it. But how many times have we seen it? It didn't really appear that wet. It probably was to the drivers. And the fact they cannot get a wet tyre or a way of it working is absolutely embarrassing to what is a multi-billion pound sport. I mean, they should all really hang their heads in shame. They clearly have learned absolutely nothing since Belgium 2021, where the fans got completely screwed over. But, maybe it was, two things there. Maybe it really was wet. And the other thing is they kind of, sort of had a race but didn't, to try and fulfill their contract, which was disgusting, I think. But the fans at home deserve better. The fans at the track definitely deserve better. I remember Monaco as well being one year. I think, was it Monaco? Last year, I think it just took quite a while, didn't it? Because of the rain, I think. But it's just if it wasn't last year, it was this year. But the whole thing was just really it's really embarrassing. And when you look at the fact that yes, the fans there, the fans here. I mean, anyone that pays for Sky Sports or anyone in Europe around the world that pays for Formula One, but even that you pay for it with your time. So you're sitting there trying to watch a race that's not happening, and you're invested. And many people watch or catch up on practice. You've got the qualifying as well, and then you've got the race, which really, is about 1.5 to 1 hour 45 minutes. But if you watch the whole show, sometimes you're looking at 3-4 hours on a Sunday when you could potentially be doing better things. But the sad thing is that you're sitting there watching a non-race. It hasn't been too bad, this year, but we know it can, and unless they sort it out, it will happen again. It's just that this year, I think it's shown, which is probably a good thing, the fact that there's been a lot of rain and wet races, and it's reminded us of this problem we've had at Belgium 2021 and before, and something absolutely has to be done. And I just hope it is. It's good that they're working on this wet tyre. It surely has to be ready for next year, without question. There you go. There's my rant over. So there we go. This has been the Hot Lap, and we'll catch you next time.